Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sidestories. How are you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing all right, Darian. Today, on our exciting episode, I'm assuming we have something interesting to talk about, or at least I hope. This was your episode, so...
Wait, I was supposed to have something prepared?
Oh, gosh, he always does this. But yes, again, welcome back to Side Stories, everyone's favorite edutainment podcast. This is our second episode of Season 3. Thank you all for coming. Sorry I didn't get to do the whole, proper intro last time for the first episode of the season. It was a little bit slapdash, so I'm making up for lost time now. But anyways... Darian, let's get into it.
Yeah, so I do actually have something that I think is pretty interesting today.
Well, let's hear it.
I want to talk about the life of one of the most influential and also tragic figures in the history of math.
Oh, how romantic.
Yeah. His name was Evariste Galois.
Great name.
And he is largely credited with developing what's now called Galois theory and really laying the stage for all of not only modern group theory, but also modern abstract or modern algebra as well.
Wow, that's a lot of intelligent things you just said that went completely over my head. I'm sold. Keep going.
That's okay. The gist of it is he individually made a lot of very important contributions to areas of math that are incredibly important today. His work has applications in a whole variety of fields beyond math, including physics primarily. Quantum mechanics in particular is largely predicated on group theory, among similar ideas, but also economics and cryptography and a variety of other fields as well.
Okay, so basically everything that's above my pay grade.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. Yeah, all right. It's time to learn. Let's do it.
And later on in the episode, probably after we discuss his life a little bit, I will go into a little more detail into what exactly it was that he did. It won't be like a full mathematical treatise, but I will talk about some of the highlights of his theory and the sorts of things that he was thinking about.
Yeah, so for all of you dumb people like me, what he's saying is he's going to explain it to us afterwards, after we talk about his actual life, which is the part that, again, us dumb people can understand. So again, this will be a good episode for all the dumb and smart people out there.
Thank you for that delightful summary.
There you
go. I really
go.
appreciate it.
All right, well, again, for people with a room temperature IQ like myself, we gotta explain it sometimes. The floor is yours, Darian. Take it away.
Anyway, so yeah, Evariste Galois was born in October 1811 in Bourg-la-Reine, France, which today is actually a suburb of Paris.
So it's gotten infinitely worse.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, got to dunk on Paris a little.
That's one way to put it. At the time, Bourg-la-Reine was a village approximately 20 kilometers south of Paris.
Okay, so it was still safe.
Yes.
Okay. All right, go on.
Well, safe is relative because you may or may not know that there were a couple things kind of going on in France at the time, had been for a few decades before and continued to go on for a few decades afterwards.
And remind me, the exact time we're talking about here is when again?
So he was born in 1811,
okay.
But he really comes of age in the early 1820s.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot going on about France. All right.
So if just to brush up on your revolutionary French history, in I believe 1796, the Bastille was stormed in Paris, and that was really the inciting incident of what would become known as the French Revolution.
Yes, by 1811, when he is born, this would be the tail end of the Napoleonic era.
Yes, exactly. Napoleon would come to power as first consul, I believe, in 1804.
That's when he was emperor. It was 1799 is when he became first consul.
I see, yeah. So he became emperor in 1804, and by 1811, it was basically the height of his power. He was winning a lot of his wars, and he was really sort of on top of the world. But in the next few years, he made a couple missteps. His power started to wane, and I believe by either 1814 or 1815, he was deposed. He was deposed the first time.
1814 was the first time. 15 was the second time. So
yes.
You're right about both. Both years he was deposed.
1815 was his 100 days, where he came back, made a brief reappearance, and then was deposed again. And so the time where Evariste was coming of age was sort of the interregnum between Napoleon losing power the second time after the 100 days and the rise of the Second French Republic.
Which reminds me, real quick, at the end of our last episode, I had mentioned that we were going to be talking about the French monarchy and all that. This is actually an interesting coincidence because this is not the topic I had planned. That topic, I realize, is going to be a very long, probably series of 4 episodes. So that's coming down the line for all of you who are invested in that. This is just a happy coincidence where Darian picked this topic, and it is kind of about that. But also, that's very much a background element. So just keep all these things in the larger political scope of this time period in the back of your mind for the episodes coming up next.
And actually, it's not really a background element because Evariste was very heavily involved in Republican activities at the time.
Okay, interesting. See, I don't know anything about this. I'm learning about this for the first time.
Well, I'm going to learn you, Aaron.
Yay, I'm excited.
But yeah, so for probably the next month and a half, we're just going to be immersing ourselves and you in 19th century French history.
It's going to be great. Trust me. It's going to be really fun.
It's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited.
There will be some breaks in there. Don't worry. It's not going to be all in a row. So get ready for that.
Yeah, so anyways, as I said, Evariste was born October 1811. Both of his parents were very intelligent and very well educated. They were both teachers, and his father was actually also the mayor of Bourg-la-Reine, and his mother was his sole educator for approximately the first 12 years of his life. And Evariste was definitely very intelligent, just like both of his parents, though he never really showed any particular aptitude for math, just because he was never really exposed to any real deep math before he went to college. But in 1823, this is where his life really picks up. His first, what would it be, 12 years are rather unexciting, insignificant.
He was, a kid.
Yeah,
usually they don't make a whole lot of history.
Right. But yeah, 1823, he begins to attend the Lycée Louis-le-Grand. And I think this is probably an appropriate point to just give the usual disclaimer that I speak English and only English. I don't speak French. I'm going to do my best. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while,
you know how this is going to go.
Yeah, it'll probably be better than my attempt at Indonesian and Vietnamese names, but it's by no means going to be fantastic. So if you're a Francophone, I know this might tick you off, but just, just know I'm doing my best.
Look, I didn't come onto the podcast today to apologize to a bunch of cheese-eating surrender monkeys. So, all right.
Okay with that.
Hey, it's a Simpsons joke. You can't get mad at me.
Aaron said that, not Darian.
All right,
for the record,
French will be knocking down this door any minute.
But within his first year at the Louis-le-Grand, there was actually a rebellion that was staged by about 40 of the students at the school, and all 40 of those students were expelled. There's no reason to believe that Evariste was involved in any of the rebellion activities, but the way in which the students who were involved were punished almost certainly had an effect on how he viewed the people in his academic circles as teachers, and also just sort of the political atmosphere around him in general. Both of his parents were both very left-wing, very ardent Republicans, and that's a streak that Evariste is very much going to hold with him his entire, unfortunately, short life. But then by 1824, this is when Evariste is first enrolled in a official math class, and he is absolutely hooked. So prior to enrolling in this class, he does decently well in all of his subjects. He's a pretty normal, very good student, fairly well behaved, but once he enrolls in this math class,
everything changed.
He dives deep into math and basically foregoes everything else, and there is a very marked change in his demeanor and how he approaches all of his other classes.
I really love the idea that math was so influential on him. It basically changed him as a person.
It really did.
That really is fascinating to me.
His two passions were math and Republican politics.
How fascinating. When a man discovers his passions, you truly learn who he is.
Mm-hmm. So that was very much a turning point in his life. Obviously, he is very naturally gifted at mathematics, and he is able to essentially jump right into extremely advanced math. He doesn't really bother with any of the basics at all. He's diving right into even books like Geometry by Legendre, which is notoriously known as a book that's so dense and so complicated that even like lifelong mathematicians took years to really comprehend everything that was in that book. And he read those books like novels, really.
So he just picked it up because he was so passionate about it and he's able to understand it because he has such a talent for it?
Yes. He's
That's pretty incredible.
Very naturally gifted in mathematics, which a lot of the sources I read went out of their way to point out that neither of his parents or anyone in his family really had any sort of known aptitude in math. So he was sort of a standout in that regard.
Okay.
Everyone in his family was very smart, but not necessarily like mathematical savants.
Okay. Interesting.
And then actually... So for any of our older listeners, in 1829, at the age of 17, he published his first mathematical paper. So I don't know what any of you were doing at the age of 17. I know what I was doing. I definitely wasn't thinking about writing mathematical papers. For those of you who are interested, his paper was on continued fractions, which are essentially fractions that contain fractions that contain fractions that contain fractions, and so on and so forth, ad infinitum.
Okay, so basically increasingly shrinking fractions, if I'm understanding this. Does that make sense, or am I, again, a complete mathematical moron in not understanding this at all?
So it's think about it this way: like you have a fraction, right? You have a numerator and a denominator.
Yep.
And let's say that the denominator of that fraction also contains a fraction.
Okay.
But then the denominator of that fraction contains a fraction.
Okay.
And so on and so forth. You just keep going and going. So you have fractions nested within fractions, sort of like those Russian dolls.
Oh, okay. Now I'm getting it. Okay, good job. Good example. Now I get it. Now a dumb monkey like me can understand.
I don't know. Those might sound fairly mundane, I suppose, or rather uninteresting. There is a lot of interesting math that you can do with that. Really, this paper is notable insofar as it was his first paper. It didn't really have any bearing on any of the work that he would do later in his life, or any of the work that he'd be notable for.
Okay, so he was just getting warmed up doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And very, very quickly, like within the next few months, he actually writes several other papers that he attempts to have published. And this is where another interesting thing comes up. One of the cool things about his story is that some of the biggest names in all of math history make like cameo appearances in his story. Basically, the 19th century as a whole, but 19th century France in particular, was just a hotbed for really, really innovative and progressive mathematics.
Interesting.
And basically all of the biggest names in 19th century French math in some way or another cross paths with Galois.
He got around.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. Though I suppose it helps that they all were living in and around Paris at the time, and he was, kind
of a center for learning then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It very much was. But so with these other papers that he published, or attempted to have published, he submitted them to Cauchy, who was one of these really big name mathematicians and if anyone has studied mathematics, you've definitely heard of Cauchy.
Well, I have not studied mathematics, so I've definitely not heard of Cauchy, but I'm sure he was a wonderful guy.
He was, again, extremely influential, extremely big name. But as far as this story goes, he's significant because he actually lost those papers.
Oh, way to go, Cauchy.
Yeah, they were thus never able to actually be submitted. And this also starts to rub Galois the wrong way, because this isn't the only sort of thing that's going to happen. And just over time, he's going to really start to resent a lot of the mathematical establishment, almost like he resents the political establishment that he fought really hard against.
A true rebel's rebel.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, at about that same time, tragedy is going to strike his family, because his father is going to commit suicide in July of 1829.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So remember earlier I mentioned that his father was the mayor of Bourg-la-Reine, and he is also an ardent Republican.
Mm-hmm.
So at this time, there's going to be an attempt to essentially oust Galois' father out of office.
I can't believe they would do this.
I mean, it's revolutionary France.
Oh,
I
actually,
think
no,
you
I
should
can believe they would do this.
Yeah, so some of the more conservative royalist elements in the village are not exactly going to like Monsieur Galois' politics, and they're essentially going to forge documents to not necessarily incriminate him in anything, but just cause enough of a scandal to
just force them out, basically.
Force them out.
French politics.
Monsieur Galois he's not really a politician. I mean, he's not the type of person to be able to take these sorts of things in stride.
He's not a true political animal.
No, and it's going to weigh pretty heavily on him, and he's going to take that way out.
Dang, wow.
And
bad field to get into, jeez.
Yeah. Again, this is 19th century France.
You got to be hard-boiled to survive that, man.
Yeah, unfortunately, stuff like that isn't uncommon.
Heck, even now, crazy stuff like that can happen in France, man. I mean, anywhere, but seriously, France still has a crazy political culture. It's really interesting.
And I wanted to mention this earlier, just as sort of, for those of you who might not be familiar with the time period, if you're familiar with any of the instantiations of Les Miserables,
yes,
this is the exact same time period.
Yeah,
those events are going on. Are
when the play is set.
Yes,
for the musical book.
Yep, all that. When all that is set, this is the exact same time. And a lot of the events that are going on at the time are obviously also going on in the play. So if that's a useful backdrop for you, it actually was rather useful for me. And that's also going to come up in a rather interesting twist towards the end of the story.
Ooh, why didn't you sell me on that in the beginning, Darren? You could have said that as we're going to talk about math. Oh, yeah, there's also bits of Les Mis.
Because I forgot about that. I was too busy talking about
Darren, it's
math.
so much easier to sell. Les Mis is one of those highest grossing musicals ever, and here we are talking about math.
I'm trying to sell it now, and I promise you, Aaron,
yes.
we'll talk about Les Mis more in just a little bit.
Okay, all right, good. Just want to make sure.
I pinky promise.
It's not for my benefit, it's for the audience, Darren. Thank you for sitting through this, by the way. We love you all. It's very interesting, which is not a shot at you. It's more of, I know math is a hard topic to sell, but it's fun.
Unfortunately. Makes me
You're fighting the good fight, Darren.
So, back to his father's suicide.
Oh, yeah, right. Forgot about that part.
Yeah, July 1829, his father dies, and unfortunately, 2 weeks later, he has to sit for the entrance exam to the École Polytechnique, which is the premier center of higher learning for mathematics in France at the time. So this is like the Harvard or the Princeton of France. And this actually isn't the second time, or this isn't the first time, but rather the second time that Evariste has attempted to get admitted into the École. And because of his father's suicide, he's obviously not in a very good state of mind to take the exams, so he fails the second time.
Oh.
And that's sort of it for him and any chances that he may have had to get into École Polytechnique. And so he settles for the École Normale, which is more of a, I guess, run-of-the-mill university.
This is a very dramatic math story, actually. I was wrong. This is going to be an easy sell.
It gets more dramatic,
right,
trust me.
Come on, let's do it.
So his time at the École Normale isn't going to last very long, though he is going to be rather productive while he's there. In February of 1830, he submits his first, I guess you could say, big paper. And it's called On the Condition that an Equation Be Soluble by Radicals. And so this is really going to get into the meat of his mathematical legacy, if you want to call it that. I think this might be a good time to just have a brief excursion into a little bit of the math that he was actually working with.
All right, everyone hang on. We're going to do it.
So going back to like high school algebra.
Oh, no, don't put me back.
You learned about equations, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm, sure
and
did.
You learned how to solve different types of equations, right?
Well, that's debatable, but yes.
You were taught.
They attempted.
There was an attempt to teach you how to solve equations.
There was a chance.
Yeah. So you have like linear equations, which are relatively easy to solve. You also have another special type of equation called a polynomial equation.
Mm-hmm.
So there are equations that look like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And for students in high school and college who are learning how to solve polynomial equations, they can be rather tricky. But
Sure were.
in the broad scheme of things, polynomial equations are relatively easy to solve. In the sense that you can, there's always going to be a solution, and you can always solve it using a variety of techniques, though probably the most standout technique for solving polynomial equations is the dreaded quadratic equation.
Oh, no. This is my arch nemesis in high school, by the way. I hated these things.
So for those of you who either don't remember or have repressed
yes, memory,
the
yes.
quadratic equation.
If you're like me and you have PTSD, post-traumatic, I was going to try to say like summation, but I don't think that, is that how that, would that be a math joke?
It'd be an attempt at a math joke.
Yeah, see, I can't even do math jokes right. Gosh, help.
So, quadratic equation, trigger warning,
No.
x equals negative b plus or minus
No,
square root of b
not the
squared
song.
minus 4ac all over 2a.
Not the song. No, they made me sing it all the time.
I wasn't going to sing it, I was just going to say it.
No.
Yeah, so regardless of how much you may have just hated that equation with a burning passion when you were in high school or in college or whatever, that equation is really useful, and it's really cool because it works for every single polynomial equation, and the quadratic equation has been known to mathematicians for centuries, even at the time of Galois. So it was a very well-known result in math. But that raises the question that, okay, so you have a polynomial, or a quadratic equation, which is a second-degree polynomial. So that means that you have the x squared, right?
Yep.
The notable part being the x cubed. That's what makes it a cubic polynomial.
All right.
Turns out that you can solve all of those as well using what's called the cubic equation.
Well, the you there being very informal, because by you don't mean me, because I can't.
If you had a gun to your head, you were given the cubic equation, and you were told how to do it,
Sounds like I'm going to die, actually. Sounds like I'm going to die, Darian. Sounds like that's a way to kill me in some sort of saw trap.
Okay, so maybe Aaron would die. But
the smarter people listening to this podcast would be able to figure it out.
The important part is that for cubic polynomials, there's a cubic equation where if you need to solve the cubic polynomial by finding its roots, it's essentially interchangeable terminology, you can use that cubic equation.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to tell you what it is. One, because I don't know it, and two, I don't know it because it's very long and very unwieldy, but it exists for people who need it. And again, at this point, the cubic equation had been known for like 250 years.
Okay, well,
So
how does this roll back to Galois here?
I'm getting to that.
Oh, making sure.
So the next step from that would be quartic equation. So you have a polynomial of degree 4. I'm not going to go through all that, but those exist. Those also have their own equation. And you know how I said the cubic equation was very long and unwieldy?
Yes. This one's longer and worse?
Way worse.
Okay, yep.
Like, if you have a computer, great, let the computer do it. Otherwise, you're going to need a really big piece of paper. If you use just like a standard notebook paper, you probably won't be able to fit your solution on a single page.
Dang it.
It's ridiculously long. I've never used it once, and I never plan on using it. But again, just like the other ones, the cool thing is it exists.
Okay.
And mathematicians have been playing this game for quite a while. At the time of Galois, quartic equation was also a somewhat new discovery, but it was like again well established.
It was all the rage with those strange group of math nerds who are really, really into it.
Yep,
The
exactly.
cool people on this planet. Okay.
Galois being among them.
Okay. All right.
But then this is where things start to get hairy.
Ooh.
Because you can keep playing this game that we've been playing just over and over and over. So the next logical question would be, okay, what about quintic polynomials? Polynomials of degree 5.
Oh, no.
Or sextics, ones with degree 6, so on and so forth. And this had been a problem that mathematicians have been chewing over for about 300 or 400 years, and no one had really been able to make any progress. And this is really what Galois was interested in. He was trying to figure out how can you solve, is it possible to solve any sort of polynomial equation using the basic arithmetic operations, so addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, as well as radicals. So that's like square roots, cube roots, so on and so forth.
I'm pretty radical.
You are pretty radical.
Sorry, I gotta have my little bits added in here. I'm not trying to take away from the math.
Attention, FBI. We found
Not
one.
that kind of radical. Well, let's not get into that.
Yeah, so this is where maybe you can start to see the connection to what we've been talking about and the title of his paper on the condition that an equation be soluble by radicals. So he was exploring the topic of being able to solve polynomial equations of degree 5 or higher using just those arithmetic operations and radicals. And the interesting thing about this is that he made progress on the problem. What he proved is that up to degree 5, you're all well and good. That's something that had already been known. But if you have a degree 5 polynomial or greater, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to solve it.
Oh, well, that is horribly disappointing.
Yes.
This crushed a lot of people's dreams, didn't it?
It's sort of bittersweet because on the one hand, it's a sort of disappointing result, but he also solved like a 300-year-old problem.
Which is cool in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very cool. And what was even more interesting about it is the way that he solved it. He solved that problem or proved his hypothesis by using the foundations of what I mentioned earlier, what we call group theory.
Okay.
And I'm not going to get into what group theory is, but essentially it's the study of symmetries, and it's incredibly useful. It's actually one of my like personal favorite areas of math to study.
All right.
And he essentially.
Well, if you like it, it must be cool.
What?
If you like it, it must be cool.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely radical.
Woo! All right. Sorry, go on.
But yeah, he essentially pioneered this field. No pun intended for mathematicians out there. If you know, you know.
Okay, well, I'm not in the in-joke group, so I feel left out. All right.
But what's interesting about it is that essentially he took the domain of, or the traditional domain of the problem that he was trying to solve, which was working with equations, trying to solve equations, and he reinterpreted that problem into an entirely new sort of like set of terms. He essentially created an entirely new field of mathematics just to translate his problem from one set of ideas into another to make his problem easier to work with. And that field that he created, like I said, we call group theory, and more specifically Galois theory. If you're interested in it and want to learn more, there's plenty of sources online and books where you can learn all about all that. I'd highly recommend it. It's really fascinating. Anyway, so math tangent, or whatever you want to call it, excursion aside, we can get back into the actual history and hopefully bore you to death less.
Oh, gosh. Don't say that, even if it's true. Sorry, no, Steve.
For the astute listener, we are.
Those of you still awake. Sorry.
You'll remember that we're in February of 1830.
Woo!
That's when Galois submits his paper, and it's not very well received because, much like other great geniuses, I picture Galois in many regards to be a lot like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. He doesn't really have the patience to stoop down to other people's intellectual level. He just assumes that everyone should come up to his. And so Galois was not the most eloquent person. His papers were just notoriously impossible to read and interpret because he didn't really have any sense of like organization. And
he was a messy genius.
Yeah, he was very messy in that regard, and regardless of the content of what he had, or regardless of his ideas, the people reading his papers weren't able to comprehend what he was thinking, not because they were dumb by any means. And I think when people talk about Galois' story, they kind of make that assumption that he was just way beyond everyone's time. And don't get me wrong, he was very progressive and he was ahead of his time, but it's not like everyone around him was so abhorrently stupid that they wouldn't be able to understand his work if they tried. Galois was just not good at writing.
Not a writer.
And he didn't have the patience to get better at writing.
That sounds like a decent number of geniuses out there.
Yeah, a lot of the referees of his papers recognized his potential. They just weren't really able to recommend that his papers be published because they were so poorly written. And that kind of ticked him off. He just continually started to resent this mathematical establishment more and more. And actually, with this paper in particular, it was given to another really big mathematician, Fourier, who ended up dying before he could get through the paper, and so it was never published this time. So by July 1830 now, the political events that are going on in the background sort of come to a head, and the current king, Charles X, actually ends up fleeing France. And
we're going to talk about that one day.
We are going to talk about that in much greater detail.
Very soon.
But for now, know that Charlie is out of town, and Louis Philippe is now on the throne, for better or for worse. Galois is not very happy about that, and neither are a lot of Paris. There are riots and protests all over Paris. Evariste among them, or he wants to be among them, but actually I guess you could say the principal of the École Normale recognizes that essentially all the students at the school are political radicals who want nothing more but to just rebel and protest with everyone else. So he actually locks all the students in the school.
Wow, it sounds like modern times.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
Galois is not having any of this, and he attempts to climb the wall of the school so he can get out because he just wants to protest. He isn't able to make it. The principal finds out, and he is promptly expelled.
Oh, come on. My boy didn't do nothing.
A couple days later, there's sort of like a snarky hit piece in the local paper that we don't really know who the author is, but we have a lot of reason to believe it was probably Galois.
Was it poorly written?
No.
Well, his snarky writing was better than his math. That sounds about right.
Interestingly enough, we do have some of his more political writings left. He did write a little bit.
Interesting.
And I've never read them. I only found one source that actually referenced them, and they said that they were abhorrent and just not
the man
good.
Clearly didn't have a flair for politics either.
No. And they weren't even like political treatises. They were polemics.
Oh, that's going to be a fun one.
And he also wrote poetry.
Oh,
anyways,
yeah, I'm getting a better sense of this person.
December 1830, Galois is promptly expelled. Actually, his expulsion wasn't supposed to go into effect until January, but he said, well, I know where this is going, screw this. And he joins the artillery of the National Guard, which is a very radical left-wing unit in the National Guard. And not more than a couple weeks later, it actually gets abolished by Louis Philippe for being too radical and being a potential threat to the throne. That also ticks off Galois.
This man was just mad about a lot going on.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a lot to be mad about, but this will start to be a theme for the
entirety of French history up until now.
Well, that. I was also going to say the rest of his unfortunately short life.
Yeah, speaking of his short life, let's how is this going to end? How much more do we have to go through? Let's see.
No, not very much more.
Okay, let's end strong.
Okay, so beginning of 1831, he basically takes a break from mathematics and decides to go like headfirst into politics.
Of course.
Could say for better or for worse, but it's mostly for worse.
Because he's gonna kill him.
It's
we're getting there.
You'll see. Don't.
Oh,
yeah.
No. Oh no. No, Galois. No, don't do it.
He does try to republish his paper that killed Fourier a few months earlier, and he submitted it to another famous mathematician, Poisson, actually at Poisson's behest.
Mm-hmm.
But he encouraged him to submit it, and
right.
Poisson was the one who was going to review it. But in the meantime, while he's doing that, while he joined the artillery of the National Guard, and when it was promptly abolished, 19 of the officers from that unit were arrested on charges, mostly I think trumped up charges of treason or potential treason. It doesn't really matter at this point.
Sounds like a political purge.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yep.
There was a trial for them held in April of 1831, and they were eventually all acquitted. And Galois was super excited about this. In May, there was a banquet held in those officers' honor. Galois was in attendance, and actually so was Alexandre Dumas. Just famous people all over the place in the story.
Yes, and Alexander Dumas wrote Three Musketeers, I believe.
Exactly.
And The Count of Monte Cristo.
Yes.
That's where you'll recognize his name.
And it's not pertinent to the story, but Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah, read it.
Read it.
There you go.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Do it.
And also, Les Mis connection, École Louis le Grand, where Galois first went to school. Victor Hugo also went there as well.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Probably at roughly the same time as well.
For those of you that only saw the musical, that's the guy who wrote the original book.
Yes, it is.
There you go. In case you didn't get that, if you're a normie.
But so
he also wrote Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yes, he did. So at this banquet, which Dumas is attending and gave an eyewitness account, Galois gives a toast to their noble king, Louis Philippe.
Oh, no. I can sense where this is going.
He does so while holding a dagger.
Oh. No, that's a bad idea. Don't do that.
And he probably had the best of intentions. The people just misinterpreted, but
I don't know about that one.
People got super ticked off about this, and Galois was arrested at the banquet. In June of that year, he went to trial, and he had a lawyer who's like, okay, so you clearly messed up. You did this. We all know you did this. I'm going to try to spin this for you. What I'm going to say is you didn't say to Louis Philippe. You said to Louis Philippe if you betray us. So you weren't actually threatening the king. You were
warning the
king, which is semantically different.
We can get through it in court. Yeah. Crafty lawyer he was. Crafty French lawyers.
And it was a really good plan. It sort of backfired a little bit because as Galois was testifying, he had to say, well, Your Honor, what I actually said was to Louis Philippe if he betrays us. But as soon as he said to Louis Philippe, all of the Republicans in the courtroom exploded into cheers.
And they kind of ruined that for him, didn't they?
Yeah, the cheering drowned out the very critical part where he said if you betray us. But it did eventually work out because he was acquitted.
How?
Somehow. No one really knows why he was acquitted.
Shifty French lawyers. Yet again.
But it's not really much cause for celebration because a month later on Bastille Day, 14th of July, 1831.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Nothing good ever happened on that day.
People got pretty hyped up.
Oh, no.
Galois included. There was a lot of protests and revolts again. Just a current theme.
Average day in France in the 1800s.
Yeah, and Galois took this a little too seriously. He not only showed up dressed in his Artillery of the National Guard uniform,
no,
the illegal abolished military unit.
No,
he was also carrying a loaded rifle.
No, this is terrible.
3 loaded pistols.
No,
and a sword.
This man was clearly asking to die.
And a month after being acquitted, he was arrested again.
Did he have a death wish? Maybe.
We'll get to that.
Okay. We're only just getting... Oh, my gosh. All right, continue.
You'll see how all this will work out.
I'm just going to brace for
I'm
impact.
just hitting the high points of his life. So, yeah, he didn't get away so easily on this one. He was sentenced to, I want to say, 9 months in prison.
Oh, boy. Okay, that's not terrible.
He ended up only doing 6 because there was a cholera outbreak in the prison in March of 1832. And so he was released and moved to what was essentially a boarding house. But during his time in prison, his mental health really deteriorated.
As it tends to.
He apparently tried alcohol for the first time.
Oh, no.
And hit it a little too hard. There's an account of him getting drunk and just sort of pouring his heart out to a fellow inmate, basically saying something to the effect of, I don't...
Well, I apologize for that great shattering you just heard in the episode. That was Darian's light fixture just came off of his ceiling and shattered all over the ground. I think it was the angry ghost of Galois trying to haunt us, to be honest. I'll have to call Casey, our resident ghost expert, and figure this out.
Yeah, that light's not more than, what would you say, 2 or 3 feet from where I'm sitting?
Yeah, it just fell right behind him. Again, I think Galois coming to get you, man. It's an angry, radical French ghost.
And just because it's fun, we're going to leave all of that in.
Yeah, I'll try.
We did take like a 5-minute break to clean all that up, but if you heard the pause in my explanation, it's because I could see out of like the corner of my eye, everything happening. Like I saw the light get brighter, and then I hear this crash.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I apologize for that. I don't know what I'm going to do about the light.
Yeah, we decided to keep this in because it was interesting and kind of funny and perfectly timed. Plus, we got to make the French ghost joke, so it's like, hey, why not? I will try to make the shattering not ear-splittingly loud in post-production, and yeah, all right, let's just finish it up. We're being haunted by Galois. We got to do this right.
Yeah, so Galois gets drunk. He's pouring his heart out to an inmate, and he says something to the effect of, "I don't have anyone in my life. Like, my father died a couple years ago, and there's really no one that I have to replace him, so I just feel empty."
Mm-hmm.
And
that's really rough, man. Jeez.
at around the same time that happened, while he's still in prison, he gets word that Poisson had rejected his paper. So this is the third time that his groundbreaking ideas and theories get rejected because, from his point of view, the people in the institution are just too stupid and myopic to understand.
Everyone's an idiot except for me.
Exactly.
That's how he felt. This man is just in agony in prison, dying slowly.
But he, as I said, cholera outbreak, March of 1831, and by April he is released and put into a boarding house.
Mm-hmm.
He's not totally clear on this. I think he is still technically under like some form of house arrest, but he's no longer in a prison. Prison is more of like a hostel than a prison. And while he's there, he meets a pretty young woman. He's, as you know, he's been really busy with his math and with his politics for the last few years, that he hasn't really ever had time for a relationship. And he ends up falling in love with a woman by the name of Stephanie Felice Dumotel, who is probably the daughter of the physician at the boarding house that he's staying. And they exchange some letters back and forth. She's not really that into him, but he is absolutely head over heels in love with her. And this is where history gets sort of murky. We don't really know what happened or how it happened. It's most likely that either he misinterpreted what she was saying to him. She made some complaints about her current romantic situation. She was
this is the
engaged
downfall
at the time.
Many a great man. No.
Or it's also possible that she was intentionally egging him on. There's some pretty wild theories that she may have been some sort of government agent provocateur to try to take out a political enemy. But regardless of what happened, Galois, being the honorable man and passionate lover that he is,
he was French.
He was also French, so he decided to challenge...
Don't do it, Galois, don't do it.
He decided to challenge Stephanie's fiancé, a man probably by the name of Perchaud de Urbanville, to a trial by combat.
No, darn it.
So this is where legend sort of gets mixed with history. How the common story goes is, while he's still in prison, the night before he is going to duel, he sort of senses his own demise, and people say that he spent the entire night just pouring out every piece of mathematical knowledge and idea that has in his mind for posterity. That's the sort of romantic legend of what happens. What's more accurate is that he was in this boarding house. He wasn't really sure what was going to go on, but he did kind of know that he might not come out of this alive. So he ended up writing 3 letters. One was a letter to his fellow Republicans, basically apologizing for not being a good revolutionary, or not being as good as he could have been. He also wrote a letter, I believe, to his family, just sort of explaining the situation. And he wrote a third and most important letter to his friend, a fellow student by the name of Auguste Chevalier, basically telling him that he's been working on this idea for a long time. The same ideas that were in these papers are getting rejected, and he's taken the entire night to refine all of his work, and he laid it out in what amounts to about 8 pages. And he asked Chevalier to take these letters and transcribe them and give this last letter to two more famous mathematicians, Gauss and Jacobi, and in hopes that they will understand his ideas and disseminate them to the wider mathematical community. And having done all of this, he goes out on the morning of May 30th, 1832, and he meets D'Urbanville and probably Stephanie's uncle as well, though it's not really known exactly who was there. They duel, he gets shot in the gut, and he's just sort of left there by his opponents and also by his seconds.
That's dirty, man.
Yeah. And
so even his friends just left him to die.
Everyone left him.
Wow.
He ended up laying there all night for hours. He was found by a peasant, and he was taken to the hospital. His brother was there by his side, and supposedly his last words were, "Don't cry, Alfred. I need all my courage to die at 20."
Dang.
And it's with that he passed on.
Those are some brave last words.
Yeah, and it's he was 20 years old when he died on May 31st, 1832. His brother Alfred, along with Chevalier, collected all of his letters as well as all of his other papers and writings at his apartment. They transcribed as much as they could, and they disseminated them as per Evariste's wishes. And here's the interesting crossover with Les Mis that I promised earlier. So Galois dies on the 31st of May, and he is going to be buried on the 2nd. And now all of his friends and comrades decide that they want to use his funeral as an opportunity to stage a protest. This is possibly at Galois' behest. We don't really know. But before his funeral, another man, on the 1st of June, a man by the name of General Lamarck dies. Now, if you remember from Les Mis, this is specifically in the 2012 movie of the musical. This is the moment where all the student revolutionaries are gathered in the ABC cafe. They sing Red and Black. Marius is trying to figure out whether he's more devoted to the cause or more devoted to his love life. And after they get done singing, Gavroche comes in and says, "General Lamarck is dead." And they use that opportunity to start their own revolution in Les Mis. So the next scene, you see General Lamarck's funeral procession. They're all gathered along the streets. Then they start singing "Do You Hear the People Sing." They sort of like take over the whole thing, and that's sort of like the point where the tension of the entire plot sort of breaks, and that's where they start their own failed revolution. All of that was actually supposed to be at Galois' funeral.
Really?
Yes, but General Lamarck was basically like the one and only good guy in the government and in the aristocracy. He was sort of a populist leader. He was a hero of the Napoleonic War, so all of the Republicans and revolutionaries loved him, and was very much a bigger deal than Galois was. And so, because Lamarck died at basically the same time that Galois did, they decided to use his funeral instead as this opportunity to protest. So Lamarck was buried on the 5th, and between the 5th and the 6th, you see what are now called the 1832 Paris Uprising, which is a historical event that was supposed to be started at Galois' funeral.
But it was started early because General Lamarck died.
It was started later. Galois was buried on the 2nd, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting. I did not know that. Well, that's cool that it has this interesting French political connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually an interesting story. Math is not boring. It's
No.
just mathematicians, at least, are not boring. They're very interesting people who have exciting lives and die in duels and have very romantic deaths.
Yeah, that's essentially the close to Évariste's very productive but also very short and tragic life. He wasn't even 21 yet when he died. So one of those situations where you can't help but think, like, what if he had lived a full life? You know, how much would he have accomplished? The last thing to really say to wind up his story is that more than 10 years later, in 1843, another, again, really famous mathematician, Louis, finally reads and understands his work. And by 1846, Galois' ideas are finally published in official journal, the Journal of Pure and Applied Mathematics in France. And from there, that really started the groundwork for the field of what we now call modern algebra or abstract algebra, and really just fundamentally changed mathematics ever since.
So essentially the world eventually caught up to him.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's an inspiring note to end on here, Darian. I believe we have wrapped up our episode then.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you again for listening. Thank you, Galois Ghost, for making a cameo appearance here and trying to apparently kill us. That was exciting. And
You have to try harder than that.
Yeah, try a little harder.
Not much harder. I'm not that hard to kill, but
yeah, many a French
a little bit more.
Well, I'm certainly harder. Many a French ghost have come after me, and none have succeeded yet. So,
tactical Aaron.
Spiritual warfare, Aaron. Can't get me. All right. Well, we'll see you all later. Again, thank you for listening yet again, and we'll catch you all next week, same time, same place, for another exciting episode. Have a good night.